This baby tortoise took 3 days to emerge from its egg after incubating for almost 100 days. New life is a common occurrence here at Garden State Tortoise, with baby turtles and tortoises making their way into the world pretty regularly. Witnessing the miracle of life like this is something that we get to see, and it is something that we cherish very, very much. This is a baby Indian star tortoise, Geochelone elegans, one of the world's most beloved tortoise species, and arguably considered one of the world's most beautiful tortoise species. But sometimes tortoise species like the Indian star can pose a bit of a challenge because they're not a species that can simply just be left outdoors in most parts of the world. And in fact, I would say probably anywhere in the United States. Some people in the Southwest may be able to keep them outdoors year round with some modifications, but this animal can be a little bit sensitive. But a little bit more on that later. The Indian star tortoise is really no different than other tortoise species when it enters the world, and it can take days for them to actually emerge from their egg after they initially start pipping through it. Pipping means they use the little caruncle or egg tooth on the end of the snout to pierce through the eggshell or crack it, and then little by little, as they gain that energy, they start making their way completely out of the egg. This time lapse you're getting to see right now of this very baby tortoise hatching shows some interesting behavior. It may look as though the tortoise is struggling, but it does know what it's doing. And it took 3 days from pipping to actually coming out of the egg fully so that it could complete the hatching process. One thing you might notice after seeing that time lapse is that the baby starts to burrow. That's because the animal's not ready to eat yet. And in fact, the yolk sac they're born with may feed the tortoise for up to 10 days after it has initially hatched. And they will stay burrowed because they know that they are vulnerable. Not unlike the African leopard tortoise, the Indian star tortoise presents us with these challenges to where they cannot simply be left outdoors. And in fact, it's often a good idea to start species like this indoors from the get-go to ensure that they're getting everything that they need. Now, while the Indian star tortoise is fully grown at typically about 8 inches for a female, and the leopard tortoise can surpass 20 inches, they do have similar needs when they are babies. And I happen to have an example of a basic, simple setup that would accommodate both African leopard tortoise and Indian star tortoise, along with many other types of tortoise species for indoor rearing. We've covered this style enclosure in many different videos, and I will include links in the description, so you're gonna wanna look for those links after you watch this video if you'd like a refresher on everything that goes into this basic setup. But just to recap real quick, we got some simple things in here. We've got the right substrate, which is a sandy soil, because again, that is safe and appropriate for many tortoise species. Remember, there's no coconut core fairy running around in the wild making sure the tortoises only eat off or step onto coconut core. We've got some chopped straw in here. We've got plenty of places for them to find refuge. We have a simple water dish, and then after, I'm going to put the heat lamp or full spectrum lighting on top of this. But remember, with lighting, you don't need that full spectrum if you're going to be keeping them outside at least half the year. And the 2 tortoises that are going in here have spent April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and now part of November outdoors. So they're only gonna need a little bit of heat to get through the winter. Let's go get them. Judging by the way I'm dressed, it is warm today, but the temperatures are about to plummet well into the season, which means it's time for these tortoises to come indoors. These are the baby Libyan Greek tortoises that we have been raising, and they have spent every single day of their lives outdoors since they were hatched back in April of this year. Now, while this one was out, this one was starting to burrow, and that's because even though we think it's warm today, for a species that comes from Libya, which is in northern Africa, well, it's not really all that warm, and these animals require more consistent, warmer temperatures to reach optimal activity patterns. And that's why they're gonna come inside for the duration of winter before going back out here in March or April. So these 2 little Libyan Greeks are going to spend winter in this tub, and we'll see how they grow. I don't expect them to be incredibly active over the winter because this building does fluctuate, which is exactly what I want it to do. I don't like to keep any animal at a constant, consistent temperature because it's really not like that anywhere in the world, at least not where most of these tortoises are coming from. So Whether it's a Libyan Greek tortoise, an Indian star tortoise, or an African leopard tortoise, these basic setups really work well. And again, I'm only going to put a heat lamp on these babies because they have spent so long under the natural sun in that raised garden bed. I will also include a link in the description of this video if you'd like to do an outdoor raised garden bed to keep babies outdoors. Because depending on the area you're in, you could do it with a wide variety of species, if not all. So, these tortoises will be in here. We're going to mimic the setup for the Indian and the leopard that we are raising. Those two only just hatched, which is why they're in containers. They need to completely absorb the yolk sac and take a little bit of time off from the effort they just put into coming into the world. Even though these are a testudo, meaning they are part of that famous European genus of tortoise, these particular testudo come from North Africa. So that's going to contrast your Hermann's tortoises. It's going to contrast your Ibera Greek tortoises, and it's going to contrast your marginated and Russian tortoises that come from locations of the world that experience weather that can be a little bit more like New Jersey, believe it or not. But that doesn't mean that these animals and their counterparts can't be kept in other style indoor enclosures if you're not going to choose to do it outdoors. So let's take a look at this one over here. This is going to be your far more elaborate, but no less accommodating indoor enclosure for, again, a wide variety of tortoise species. But what I happen to have in here is a species that typically will hibernate in nature. And the little one is actually taking a drink right now. Have a look. That is a baby Western Hermann's tortoise, Testudo hermanni. Now this enclosure is simply meant to be an example to show you how far you can go with indoor keeping. Even though this animal typically will hibernate or brumate by nature, we still don't know in current knowledge and studying these animals in nature today if hibernation aids them in longevity or not. So we're not sure. Do these animals absolutely need to hibernate or brumate? Because in theory, all that is a way for these animals to deal with unfavorable conditions. However, it has been known to pull triggers for the animals that sets them in motion for certain behaviors like breeding. Some people will claim that if they don't hibernate the animals, they don't want to breed. We like to do everything as naturally as possible here, so all of our Hermann's tortoises do get to hibernate, and they spend 365 days a year outdoors, no matter the age. This one is simply in here to show you guys an example of what you can do, because in tortoise keeping history, people have had plenty of success keeping these animals awake. Now, these animals have extremely long lifespans, so that's why none of us are really all that sure exactly what kind of role hibernation or brumation will play in the ultimate outcome for the animal. So again, we choose to do that. A lot of people keep them indoors, and this is something you can do. You can try to mimic the animal's natural environment. We were in France where we got to see wild Western Hermann's tortoises. There's a lot of pine and deciduous forest and plenty of sunlit areas. And these toad ranch enclosures are set up in a way where you can provide the animal with all of that. But you absolutely, from day one, can hibernate or brumate Hermann's tortoises and some other species of testudo outdoors, even in New Jersey. And I'm going to show you. Regardless of age, with the proper prep, Hermann's tortoises, along with some of the other testudos like marginated Russian and Ibera Greek, to name a few, can hibernate outdoors. And that is absolutely no problem for us here in southern coastal New Jersey. Now, because we still have some warmth, these tortoises are still going to be active for a little bit. They're going to come out, they might graze a little bit, they're going to continue emptying their systems, which is something that these animals do before they fully go into the torpor that they're going to be in for winter. So what we need to do is we're going to use this cold frame right here, or mini greenhouse that I've shown you guys in many videos. We're going to modify it a little bit by simply adding some chopped straw in there so the animals have a nice, comfortable place to go into. They can bask inside it on warm days, and eventually they will descend underground. And once I know that they're all in there, and I know that nobody is out here hanging around anymore, and the temperatures are really dropping, I will barricade them in there so that they stay safe from any kind of extreme conditions that may occur over the winter. And in fact, there are a couple of them that are already burrowing into this thing, but they are slightly active because they're poking their heads out. By filling this, we create an added layer of insulation inside this cold frame. because although these animals experience nature, Western hermits are typically a small species, and it would be very hard to keep track of where they are in the large enclosures that we've made for them. So this enables us to keep some tabs on them. So, spread this out. I will add more as the temperatures continue to drop. And right now, the animals can use this entranceway to go in and come out as they like. Once it really drops, this is gonna get closed up and the animals will be barricaded in here where they can safely sleep for the duration of winter. And if I need to check on them, I easily can do so because these tortoises do not go that far below the surface. It's really only a few inches. And what's even further interesting about them, in that torpor, they can still react to both rises and drops in temperature. So subconsciously, if the temperature rises, they will start just kind of in a sleep, make their way to the surface. If it drops, they will dig deeper. And this can be done with hatchlings. Hatchlings that were hatched this year can hibernate in this kind of situation. You can even make it a little bit smaller, but you've got the polycarbonate panels that keep them safe in here for the winter, and it follows an annual cycle for these tortoises. Nobody in nature is scooping the animals up and bringing them indoors to keep them warm. So I'm saying this to give you guys some comfort if you are considering doing this. We have hibernation or brumation prep videos on this channel. Don't let anybody tell you that these animals cannot be brumated or hibernated outdoors. If you do it right, if you prep, you will be able to do it. Now, of course, there's gonna be areas that are just too far north. Alaska, there you go. It's not gonna work up there. Probably some of the Great Lakes states, it may not work that well there. I'm not 100% sure, but the Mid-Atlantic region, at the very least here, as far as being up north, it's perfectly fine for these temperate or cool dwelling species. Now, I'm gonna search this pen for somebody who is living proof that from day one, they didn't need to be indoors. And here she is. This is a very special tortoise to us. This is a Western Hermann's tortoise named Yellow Jacket, and she is a surviving twin. In 2015, just over 9 years ago, this tortoise hatched out of the same egg as its sibling, and they were conjoined at the yolk sac. Unfortunately, the smaller one only lived a few years before it passed, but Yellow Jacket is now becoming a sub-adult female. She will not get that much bigger, but she's not quite ready to lay eggs yet. But this animal has lived its entire life, from that first year of life, outdoors, only being brought inside for health inspections and to film some videos and take some pictures. This animal has lived outdoors in New Jersey. She has wild type growth. She is in optimal health, and she is hibernated or brumated every single winter here inside a cold frame, just like that. Here is your living proof that when done correctly, this is what you end up with. You end up with an animal that's growing at a normal pace. Some people see her and say, wow, she's small for 9 years old. Absolutely not. It's far too common for people in reptile keeping to blow their animals up as quickly as possible because they want to get them to breeding size. That is not healthy for them long-term whatsoever. So Yellow Jacket is a prime representative of when you do things right and in a natural manner, this is what you end up with. And she is just one example of several animals that have grown up here outdoors. Something worth mentioning is when too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. Now, while hibernation or brumation is beneficial to these animals, if it goes on too long year after year, you can end up with deficiencies. Something called follicular stasis is something that can happen to these female tortoises. These females, at the appropriate times of year, need the proper amount of nutrition, sunlight, water, the whole nine. If they're sleeping for too long, year after year, this builds up inside them and can eventually kill them. And because everything happens so slowly with them, you may not even realize there's an issue until the animal is at the very end and it completely succumbs to the stasis. But we got to see this firsthand over in Europe when they actually opened up a tortoise that passed from it. Really interesting stuff. So that's something you need to take into consideration. Our animals sleep uninterrupted typically from early December till about mid-March. That's when they start coming out and moving around again. And that is a safe duration of winter's rest, so that these animals can reproduce year after year and not have an issue. So something you need to take into consideration when keeping these animals outdoors. Some people will simply wake them up a little bit early so that it was a safe period of rest, and then keep them in temporary conditions before introducing them back to the outdoors. So outdoor keeping, depending on the species, really offers a lot of benefits to both keeper and animal, but this can contrast indoor keeping. And while indoor keeping does have its limits, there are some species that you just have to do it for. What better species to contrast what I just showed you with Hermann's tortoises than the Indian star tortoises? And this right here is a very simple, not much to really gawk at, but very beneficial and necessary enclosure to have for species like this. This is a simple tortoise table style, but floor unit for Indian star tortoises. And these animals right now are basking under the heat lamp. They are nice and warm. They are at safe temperature. Now I'm still dressing this thing up. I've got to create some different hide areas, adds a water dish and all kinds of things so that the animals' lives are enriched and interesting for the duration of winter. But what happened was the temperature snapped and dropped almost unexpectedly. So what I had to do was run out there and get these animals indoors. But because I had this ready to go, no stress, no issue. That contrasts what you would do with something like a Hermann's tortoise. And again, we're basing all of this on what we deal with here in South Jersey. So you could, of course, check our temperatures and our conditions, compare them to yours, and kind of decide for yourself what you are comfortable doing. Now, while I'm on the subject of Indian star tortoises here and showing you guys just how beautiful they are, a common question we get is, how do you tell the difference between these guys and the Burmese star tortoise? All right, two iconic species, similar needs. Neither one of them can spend winter outdoors, so they both come indoors to this building right here. In my right hand, this is an adult male Burmese star tortoise, Geochelone platinota, and in my left hand is an adult Indian or Sri Lankan star tortoise, Geochelone elegans. Right off the bat, fully mature adult males here. The Burmese star is much larger, whereas the Indian or Sri Lankan is smaller. Now, Sri Lankans can get to be considerable sizes, but this is kind of a general ID for you right here. You'll notice the differences in the carapace pattern, where the Burmese star has more of a flower petal pattern on each carapace scoot, whereas the Indian star has more classic radiating lines similar to that of a radiated tortoise. When we look at the plastron, here is a major difference. You'll notice that the Burmese star has chevrons on the plastron, similar to what you see in a marginated tortoise, whereas the Indian star has the carapace pattern pretty much continuing onto the plastron. There's not too much else. The skin color tends to be very similar. You will often see, though, that the Indian or Sri Lankan star has more black blotching or spotting on the skin, whereas the Burmese star is a little bit more uniform in coloration, but they both are star tortoises. They do have different reproductive cycles, which we can get into in another video, and both animals absolutely do need to be kept warm for the winter. So there's a quick 101 on how to tell the difference between the Indian or Sri Lankan star and the Burmese star. So, overwintering baby tortoises. Who survives and who does not? Well, the truth is, all of them survive. You just have to understand the species-specific needs so that you can meet the requirements. When you're dealing with a Hermann's tortoise, you could probably hibernate or brumate it outdoors if you take the right precautions. But when it comes to the Indian star, the leopard tortoise, or the Libyan Greek tortoise, your plans should be to bring them indoors if you're not already hibernating them inside. Some of these animals may look so similar to you guys, I get it, but they do have different needs. And this is something you have to take very seriously, or you will end up with an untimely death. And all of these animals in front of me should be living very, very long lifespans. When it comes to the Hermann's tortoise, we actually accidentally hatched them outdoors in the ground here. Check out this footage right here. This was the moment I found a baby after it overwintered in its nest through winter, popping up out of the ground in the spring, and it was a perfectly healthy, fully formed baby. That would not happen with these other three. As soon as the temperatures dropped consistently for too long, the eggs of the Libyan Greek, the Indian star, and the leopard tortoise would perish. And that goes for other species too, like sulcatas and redfoots. So I hope videos like this help you guys understand that it's not just simply a tortoise. A redfoot is not a Hermann's is not a star is not a leopard. There are some similarities, and when it comes to raising them, there are certain things that the animals all do require, like hydration, lighting, heat, the proper substrate, and of course, there are sometimes even further specifics with that. But the point I'm trying to make in this video is, you can get through winter with any of these animals as long as you do your homework.